This is one of the dumbest camping mistakes people make without even knowing it. A tent can be perfectly set up and still ruin the entire night. Most campers blame the sleeping bag when the real problem starts with where they sleep inside the tent. One wrong side can turn a normal night into hours of cold, moisture, bad sleep, and panic. Subscribe for more off-grid survival mistakes. Most people only learn the hard way. It sounds ridiculous until the cold starts hitting one side of the body again and again for hours. That is when a safe campsite starts feeling broken for no obvious reason. The tent looks fine from the outside, but the inside tells a completely different story. A lot of people think the floor is flat enough and the direction does not matter. That mistake can quietly destroy body heat all night long. The problem starts with how air moves around a tent after sunset. Cold air does not just sit still once the temperature drops. It flows, sinks, slips through gaps, and collects in the lowest and weakest spots. That means one side of a tent can become a cold trap while the other feels almost normal. Sleeping on the wrong side puts the body exactly where heat disappears fastest. That heat loss does not feel dramatic at first. It starts as a small discomfort that most people ignore. Then the sleeping bag feels weak, even if it is rated for the weather. Then the ground feels harder, colder, and somehow wet. Then real sleep never happens. This is why so many campers wake up exhausted and think they just bought bad gear. The gear often is not the real problem at all. The real problem is position. The first thing that decides the wrong side is wind direction. Even light wind can keep stripping warmth from one side of the tent shell. The constant cooling lowers the temperature of the fabric and the air next to it. The colder that wall gets, the more heat gets pulled away from the body closest to it. That is why one shoulder, one arm, or one leg can feel colder than the rest of the body. It is not random. It is a heat leak caused by orientation. Another problem is the slight slope almost every campsite has. A spot that looks flat in daylight often tilts more than it seems. The tiny slope matters more than beginners expect. Cold air sinks downhill and settles low. Moisture also tends to collect in the same low side. That means sleeping downhill often means sleeping colder, damper, and worse. Some campers keep sliding all night and do not realize the same slope is also pulling them into the coldest zone. That is where fatigue starts stacking fast. The next factor is condensation. A lot of campers think condensation only comes from bad ventilation. Ventilation matters, but sleeping position changes the whole experience. The colder side of the tent usually collects more moisture on the inside wall. When the sleeper is too close to that side, warm breath and body heat feed the problem even more. Then the bag brushes the damp wall, then insulation starts getting compromised, then warmth drops hard. That is how a tent turns into a silent fridge. The sleeper keeps chasing comfort by curling tighter and breathing deeper into the bag. That usually makes the moisture problem even worse. The body starts warming trapped damp air instead of staying dry and stable. This is why a bad side of the tent does not just feel colder. It behaves colder in every possible way. The floor matters too. One side of a tent often has thinner ground cover, harder soil, or more exposed rock underneath. That side pulls heat from the body, faster through the sleeping pad. A weak pad on cold ground can fail even when the sleeping bag is good enough. A lot of campers blame the top insulation because that is what they feel first. But most overnight, heat loss actually starts below. And if the wrong side of the tent is also the colder side of the ground, the night gets ugly fast. This gets even worse near water. Rivers, lakes, and wet low ground create colder air movement after dark. A campsite that feels amazing at sunset can become miserable a few hours later. The lower side facing damp ground is often the side that gets punished first. That is why good campsites can still produce terrible nights. The spot itself is not always the only issue. The sleeping side inside the tent can be the final mistake that makes everything fail. This is also why two people in the same tent can have completely different nights. One person sleeps on the better side and wakes up fine. The other sleeps on the cold side and swears the gear is trash. The difference can be nothing more than position. That makes this one of the easiest mistakes to miss. It feels too small to matter. But small mistakes are exactly what make camping miserable. The body loses heat slowly enough to hide the danger until sleep is already broken. That is what makes it such a nasty problem. It does not look serious in the beginning. It just quietly drains comfort until the whole night collapses. And once the body gets cold, fixing it inside a tent becomes much harder than preventing it. The smartest move is to choose the warmest and driest side before getting inside. That starts by checking wind before the temperature drops. Even a simple breeze test with grass, smoke, or loose dust can reveal the cold side fast. The side taking the wind is usually the side that punishes a sleeper the most overnight. The next move is checking slope with more honesty than most campers use. If the ground is even slightly tilted, the low side should already look suspicious. That is where colder air and more moisture usually settle first. Then comes the wall test. The side of the tent closest to damp air, open exposure, or colder terrain often ends up wetter overnight. That is not the side anyone wants next to a sleeping bag. The best sleeping position is usually away from direct wind exposure and away from the lowest cold pocket. It is also the side less likely to brush against a wet inner wall. That simple choice can make cheap gear perform way better. This is why experienced campers often look weirdly obsessive about orientation. They are not being dramatic. They are avoiding stupid overnight losses that stack into real misery. Another trick is keeping the head slightly uphill whenever possible. That helps with comfort, sliding, and better sleep quality. It also helps keep the body out of the worst cold pocket if the ground is uneven. The body never fully relaxes when it keeps slipping or fighting the angle. That low-level tension wastes energy all night. And wasted energy means less warmth. Sleeping too close to the wall is another trap. Even on the better side of the tent, crowding the fabric invites condensation trouble. A wet wall touching insulation can wreck warmth faster than most beginners realize. A little space between the bag and the tent wall makes a massive difference. So the right side still needs the right spacing. This is also where pad quality starts exposing the truth. A sleeping bag cannot rescue a bad pad on cold ground. If one side of the tent has colder earth underneath, the pad becomes the real shield. That is why so many people chase thicker blankets when they actually need better ground insulation and better position. The cold comes from where the body touches failure first. And that is often the ground and the wall, not the air in the tent. Right here is where most campers start wasting money on the wrong fix. Instead of buying random gear, check the link in the description for smarter off-grid survival upgrades that actually solve the real problem. Another thing that ruins nights is gear layout. Boots, wet clothes, and packs shoved against one side of the tent can trap moisture exactly where the sleeper needs dryness. That clutter also steals space and pushes the body closer to the tent wall. A messy tent makes the bad side even worse. A clean sleep setup gives the body more dry air and more room to retain heat. Ventilation still matters, but it should work with position, not against it. If airflow is managed badly, one side can stay colder and wetter for hours. If airflow is managed well, condensation and trapped dampness drop hard. That does not mean opening everything and freezing the tent. It means balancing airflow so moisture leaves before it becomes a wet wall problem. The best campers are not the ones with the fanciest setup. They are the ones who notice tiny details before bedtime. They know a great night can be won or lost before anyone zips the door shut. That is the hidden reason some campers wake up refreshed while others wake up wrecked. The difference is rarely luck. It is usually decisions. This is also why bad nights repeat themselves across different campsites. The same mistake gets carried from place to place. Wrong side of the tent, wrong relation to wind, wrong relation to slope, wrong distance from the wall, wrong understanding of where heat is actually escaping. Once those mistakes stack together, even mild weather can feel brutal, and when weather gets worse, the same mistakes become dangerous. A camper who sleeps cold all night stops making sharp decisions the next morning. Fatigue slows everything down. Cold stress kills patience, focus, and judgment. That is when little problems turn into bigger ones. So the real lesson is not just about comfort. It is about avoiding a chain reaction that starts with one stupid sleeping position. The wrong side of the tent can steal warmth, sleep, energy, and control without making a sound. That is why this mistake matters so much. Most people never see it coming because they keep looking at the gear instead of the setup. But setup is what decides whether the gear gets a fair chance. A tent is not just a shelter. It is a system. And sleeping on the wrong side breaks that system before the night even starts. So before the next trip, do the simple check that most people skip. Find the wind, find the low side, find the damp side. Then sleep where the tent works with the body instead of against it. That one decision can change the whole night. And in the wild, one good night changes everything.